Will the Master of Magic be able to merge into the most powerful card? Find out what's going on as I hereby invite everyone to join me on my adventures through Marvel Snap. Hey everybody, it's Annabelle. So come join me for what might be my last character spotlight for Spotlight Cache Roulette ever. Now, if I can, I will do one more next week, but if I can't, it's because I couldn't figure out how to. So for the last time ever, let's take a look at a Marvel Snap Spotlight character roulette for Strange Supreme. Strange Supreme is from a universe where he picked up his lover, Christine Palmer, for a night out at a dinner party, and while driving back, they got involved into a collision. Palmer was killed, and this left him completely heartbroken and searching for answers. He eventually came across the masters of magical arts and learned their ways, but remained haunted about this death. So he transported himself back 2 years to that exact moment, and he tried to avoid any vehicular incident. However, he somehow got into another crash that killed Palmer. Strange Supreme remained determined to alter the fate of his lover and continue to rewind time. But his efforts are proven futile, as Palmer consistently dies in every scenario in different circumstances, and eventually the Ancient One had to approach the devastated Doctor and inform him that this death is considered an absolute point in the timeline, and that changing that would usher in the end of this universe. He, however, became more defiant towards this warning, determined to demand more knowledge of how to break the absolute points, and he used his time in the library to research any and all works on time manipulation. Strange Supreme will now do anything just so that his lover will have a chance at a life. He is consumed by this so much in his despair that despite him saving the world from Dormammu, he is now willing to give that up and go back in time to fix this instead. His hands never got injured in this universe, so he has become more and more stubborn and arrogant after each failure and refuses to heed any warning or advice. He has become his own grief, and in hope to restore his lover by any means necessary, he had to get more power. So he slowly merged into an amalgamation of all the demons he had summoned by absorbing them. Strange Supreme deeply loved Christine and was consumed by grief. He tried to save her but failed again and again until he ultimately was desperate enough to use his powers to form the dark dimension in his world and destroy his own universe. However, he still has some good in him. He retained his sense of humor and is willing to use the Time Stone to save a life if he has to. He also never intended for his universe to be destroyed and is willing to sacrifice everything to fix that. He is filled with regret and despair, as he is the only being left in his universe, and his efforts to save his loved one were for nothing. Strange Supreme, having been the Sorcerer Supreme on his world, possesses an extremely high level of skill in the mastery over magic, which he uses to defend his own native reality before it was gone. After he absorbed countless mystical beings over the centuries that he has been alive since the destruction of his universe, he has gained nearly unfathomable level of arcane power. He has obtained cosmic awareness, allowing him to sense, see, and communicate with all universes. And after reaching his full potential, he found a way to use his power to break an absolute point in a time bomb. However, he knows that doing so will destroy that universe. Strange Supreme was a doctor. that became his own grief in a hope to restore his love by any means necessary. And to get more power, he slowly merged into an amalgamation of all of his summons by absorbing them one by one. This is represented in Marvel Snap as he will slowly merge into your summons by absorbing them to get more power. So Marvel Snap, what this card does, it is a 2 cost, a 2 power, with the description he will gain +2 power from merging, and at the end of every turn, if he is able to, he will merge into one of the created cards on the board. So in Marvel Snap, I basically give this a 4-star rating. Now, let me go over why he gets such a high rating. Because I actually think he's a pretty decently good card, and you don't have to go as highly, deeply into him as many people say that you should. So let's just look at him as a simply stat line. If you were to look at him as a simply stat line, you're looking at a 2-2. And while saying that a 2-2 is nothing, that's pretty much the worst case scenario that you can get off of Strange Supreme. If on turn 1 you play Squirrel Girl, and on turn 2 you play the Strange Supreme, then even at the end of turn 2, he'll become a 2-5. He'll get the +2 from the merging, and then he'll get the +1 from it being a squirrel. So, because he still gets the power of the squirrel. It's not just he gets the +2 base. He still merges with the card. So that makes him get 3 from a single squirrel, which boosts him all the way up to 5 just at that point. And then after that point, if you have one more turn, he'll absorb the other squirrel, which gets him another 3, which puts him all the way up to 8 already. And that's just by playing a Squirrel Girl on turn 1. The other thing that makes him really interesting is you can protect him from any kind of shenanigans if he gets too high up. Because you can put an armor down on his location and the merge will still work. The merge doesn't care about armor. Merges don't care about armor. Merges will still work with armor, and it will even be in other lanes. It doesn't have to be the lane that Strange Supreme is in. Another interesting little fact is he will still get the +2 power if you use another merge card on him. So if you play Strange Supreme, and then you put the Hulkbuster on his location, he'll get the +3 from the Hulkbuster, plus he'll also get the +2 by it merging onto him, and then he'll still check at the end of the turn to see if there's another card that he can merge with, and he'll get another +2. So if on turn 1 you were able to play down Squirrel Girl, on turn 2 you were able to play down the Strange Supreme, and you're able to somehow get the Hulkbuster on him on turn 3, and absorb the other squirrel, he'll get that from the Hulkbuster and from the squirrel on both the same turn. One of the things that you're hoping to do with this deck that has been talked about in this deck is just to bring back good old Clog. You play the Strange Supreme on 2, you play the Debris on 3, and you basically clog up your opponent's lane while keeping your lanes relatively clear. Because it'll still eat the rocks, and while it doesn't get any power from the rocks because they're 0, it'll still get the +2 because they merged into it. It's also interesting if somehow one of your locations is a generated item location, like you get the rocks from, say, Collapse Mine, or you get the squirrels from Central Park, or even you get the monster from Monster Island. It'll pick any of those cards, even though you didn't create them, and merge with them. Also, interesting little side note is, if somehow you get a Widow's Bite thrown at you, you can play down the Widow's Bite and it'll decide to eat the Widow's Bite, even though technically this wasn't created by you. So, from some of the people were curious or cautious about this card because they were worried it might not merge with pretty much anything. And as far as I can see, as far as I can tell, this merges with pretty much everything. Another interesting route that you could go is by playing stuff like Agent Coulson. Now, on the one hand, it's good to play Agent Coulson and just have the ability to play down a card on 4 and 5 and have them merge into the Strange Supreme and not worry about having to figure out how to get the space board taken care of. The problem with it is sometimes you do want the card that comes from the Agent Coulson to stay around, especially if it's ongoing. But on the other hand, sometimes you just get a horrible card from Agent Coulson and you just sit there and go, well, I was never going to play this. Now you can just throw it down and at least get the power off of it by playing it and the extra 2 from it merging. Do be cautious about Shang-Chi. It is very easy for this card to get above 10 very easily. It's also good for your quote-unquote Scar deck, as it is one of the only 2-drops that I can think of that can easily get above 10 and can even get that, if you know what you're doing, I think by turn like 4. Depends on also what your opponent does. Also note that if you do Artemzilla it, it will eat its own clone. The Artemzilla basically copies it and each one becomes a copy, and then it reads from right to left, or location 1, location 2, location 3. So the card at location 1 will eat the card at location 2 or location 3 first. So just be cautious of that, or use that to your advantage if you want a super big spike to come around. Red Guardian is the only thing that can relatively turn off the Strange Supreme's power, because nothing is not triggered by Cosmos, not triggered by Enchantress effects. So the only thing that can truly stop it is Red Guardian, and because of how Red Guardian works, as soon as Strange Supreme eats pretty much one card, unless you do something really weird, its power is going to be pretty high. But do be cautious of Shadow Kings, as this is not a permanent power, this is a absorb power. So if you get hit by Shadow King, you go back all the way back down to 2. It's one of the few things that you can get punished by. Other than Strange Supreme this week, we've got Speed. Speed ain't that great, he ain't that powerful. Even if you play every single turn correctly, it's not great. Considering this, unless you do something really weird or get incredibly lucky, this comes down on 3. The most you can get is +7 out of this, unless you figure out some other way around this, which means this is a 310 on the best of days, and you gotta jump through so many hoops to get this up to a 310. The other one is US Agent. US Agent's just great in general. Not gonna even try to pretend that US Agent's bad. The amount of times that you can just shut down a lane or shut down a whole opponent's strategy by playing US Agent onto a location and just farming it because they can't play 4, 5, or 6 there while getting punished is pretty high. So for this particular week, you got a pretty good one in Strange Supreme, a pretty middle one in US Agent, and a pretty bad one in Speed. Now both of these are considered Series 5s and not Series 4s. So they will be more expensive than the Series 4 when the Series drops happen next Tuesday. But they'll still be less expensive than buying them in the shop. I think this is a pretty okay week to go, even if you just have speed or if you have US agent missing, especially if you have US agent missing. I think it's a good week to roll on. I roll no matter what, because this is how I make content, so let's find out what's inside this box. Box says US agent. Awesome. I'll check to see if I've ever done a US agent before. If not, I will be doing a US agent on this Friday. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and as always, remember, play for fun.